All right, let's start unwrapping this guy. So first thing I'm going to do is pop open the texture coordinate mapping view. The UV editor here, you get to by UV editor. First thing on the list. It also has this new UV toolkit, I think with the later versions of Maya. I think maybe 2017 plus, something like that. Maybe it's with 2018, I'm not sure. It's fairly new, has a lot of nice stuff in there. I'm going to close it. I don't use it too much myself, as I have different ways to get to all this stuff. Mostly through my right-click commands or up here. And it takes up some real estate on my screen that I don't want to give up right now. So I'm going to close that, move the editor to the side, and then I have this guy there. So one thing I like to do is I like to put like a checkerboard texture on it just so I could see what's unwrapped and what isn't, if that makes sense. Because normally you could just start going at it. But in this case, I like to visually see what's been unwrapped, what parts have or have not. So I'm going to assign a new material. And then I can do, I'll usually just do like bong. And then in the color slot, there's a checker up top. So I'll click that. I'm going to turn on texture viewport. So you can see it's all goofy. The first thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to go into the UV coordinates, into this little kind of box with an arrow pointing into it. And then I'm going to change the repeat UV to be something a little higher, just because by the time I unwrap it, I like to see the checkers fairly tiled. So I'm just going to do 10 for now. This is a conclusion I came to just generally unwrapping stuff into the 0 to 1 space. It's kind of like the scale, the size of the squares in the checkerboard that I'm comfortable with. And you'll see as we continue with it. So I got the whole thing selected. I'm going to go ahead, make this a little bigger, and I'm going to turn off this button right here, which is going to make it so we don't see the checker in the UV view here. So we could see it if we wanted to, and dim it and all that, but I'm just going to turn it off. And now let's start unwrapping. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the model and see what parts haven't been unwrapped, which is why I put the texture on it, right? So like this is all stretched and messed up. So I know, okay, that one's not unwrapped. The shield kind of looks like it is already, due to how we created it, which is pretty funny. But for now, I'm just going to grab this, and we don't need the other one since we're going to be duplicating it. They are instanced though, so which means I should be able to just leave it. So in this case, I'm going to solo it. Oopsies, let me get this more out of the way. I'm going to solo it, and then the way I like to work is I'll grab the whole thing and I'll just planar map it. So in this case, I'm shift right clicking and then just selecting planar map. And then I like to just mark my seams or pick things directly. So in this case, I'm just going to grab these polys and planar map them separately. So now I have a shell that's just this underside. You can kind of see the edge difference. It's like a bright white edge, which means there's a texture seam there. And then the rest of it, which is one piece. So we have two pieces. And generally, for most things these days, in Maya at least, I'll just use the unfold command, and it will come out quite nice. So you can find that in Tools, Unfold. But I think that's actually the brush here. That's interesting. I'm so used to doing it the right-click way. Let's see here. But what's cool is that if you use the Unfold brush, you can kind of paint it, and it'll come out. So you can just do little bits at a time. So in this case, it might not be what we wanted, but it'll get there if you paint it enough, right? But I'll go ahead and use the other command, which is the right-click and then drag to the left. I'm sure it's in here normally or in the one that popped up. I'm not used to going about it that way, So we could search for it a little later. But there we go. We pretty much have these unwrapped. Sometimes if there's a little distortion, I'll grab the corners and cut those. And then re-unfold it. And that way you get a little less distortion. When you're painting in like something like 3D Coat, you're not going to get a seam there. Some people, if they're painting directly in Photoshop, they might get a seam. So it might be ideal to just have them welded anyway. It really depends on your tolerance for that kind of stuff. So now that we have these two, I'm going to grab one of these edges here, and I'm going to see if the straighten cell command is going to work for us. So sometimes if it's on its own, it'll straighten it vertically. In this case, we'll just manually make it up and down. Straighten UVs, and there we go. So nice and clean. Same with this one. We could try straighten UVs as well. So I'm going to select them all. Shift right click, straighten UVs. And it just looks a little nicer. The bottom here kind of geeked out a little. So I'm going to manually move them a little further away. Now this part that I'm doing right now, I would say is pretty optional. I just like the UVs being a little cleaner, because if I'm painting some edging and edge wear, then I could just literally do like a straight line and then rough it up a little. It's not necessary. I just like the cleanliness of it. And I don't do it every single time. It's more of like, I suppose, mood. But you'll feel it out too. So there we go. There's one piece. And so what I like to do is grab that, shrink it down enough, if we're considering the 0 to 1 space being right here with the green and red lines. And I'll just put it to the side, or sometimes I'll put it like where it relates on the model. So this one, it's like towards the top of the model, so I'll put it up here. Where's the grass? I might put underneath. So we're going to blow through some of these. That's the basic workflow that I'm going to be doing for just about all these, to be honest. We'll see case-by-case basis as we get to some of the other parts, but I'm just going to go at it right now. This one I'm going to have to add some cuts on the bottom so that it can flatten out. Now with a bunch of these on this wooden sword here, I'm going to do the front and back most likely symmetrical, but the tops and sides not. And so it'll cause a little annoyance when we're painting it, but we'll go over that while we're painting it. Basically what I'm trying to avoid here is we're pretending that there's like a polygon limit that we don't want to get too high, so I'm not going to just split this down the middle like that. I'm going to keep it so it's just, you know, one flat plane on each side. So here I'm going to split the top. It's causing like a weird pinch up here. Anywhere you see it like kind of deforming or messing up the checkerboard, right? You want this to be pretty clean and the checkers to look like undistorted checkers. It's a good way of checking your UVs to see if there's going to be any kind of like weird deformation. In this case with those, doesn't like them when they're cut, so I'm just going to leave them together. And I could cut the sides off as well, but for the sake of it, I'm just going to leave them connected here. Another thing you could do, if it's looking a little too distorted, you could favor one thing over the other. So like the flat face here is going to be a lot more visible than the sides. So you could distort some of the side if you want, or you could remove some pieces. We're going to get rid of these and just move it elsewhere, right? And that way, when we unfold this one again, the shape might be a little different. It's still kind of geeking out because of the top, though. But I think we're going to leave it for now. And I'll decide I want to handle that a little differently. Let's see. It looks like we got all the pieces on their own, so let's start overlapping. So this thing, straighten it, find the other side. Now I want to make sure that up is still up properly, right? So the same verts on top are going to be in the front and the back. So this is the top one's here, and the top one's there. Okay. Let's go ahead. I'm going to use snap here by holding V. Sometimes it doesn't want to work, so we might not use it. All right, it's being fun. I haven't quite figured that out yet. Why snapping works sometimes in the unwrap mode, and sometimes it does not. It's quite handy because it's snapping here to grid, but vert, it's a little picky sometimes. We could always try enabling it here. It doesn't want to do it, but that's okay. We'll just move that stuff over and we'll do match UVs. So if we put them roughly the same spot, select all of them, there should be a match UV. Let's see, tools. Where is it? I'm sure I'm like looking right over it. Snap match UVs, and it's way too high sensitivity. I'm going to use the options box, set the tolerance to like 0.001. Hit apply. Too little. Try 0.01. There we go. And so now it made them in the exact same spots, and now I can try straightening again. There we go. So a little roundabout. You probably don't have to be as precise. It really doesn't make as big of a difference as I'm making it out as far as time spent on it, but still want to share like the workflow. If you did need it to be exact, this is one of the ways you can do it. So considering the snapping though, I'm going to actually, first I'm going to make sure I save it. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to switch to UV editing in the workspace up here. Some newer versions of Maya have workspaces, and the UV editing one is nice because it splits your camera or your viewports into two. One of them just being the UV editor, and one being the 3D view. So this is nice rather than having it overlapping on top of your camera, which can be annoying if you want to center your camera, because when you rotate around, sometimes it'll get hidden behind the UV window. And this way, you're always seeing it, and you're always seeing your unwrap as well. Same thing here. Let's just start breezing through here. Top. Okay. Still doesn't want to. That's okay. All right. Also want to make sure the sides are proper. Like here I'm doing opposite sides. So if we do paint a seam, it might not work out. So I need to make sure I grab this, flip those angles. There we go. Another way you can do it is just by scaling. And then you also have, where is it? like straighten, but you could also align things to the left or to the right. Or maybe they took that out of the recent one. Here we go. Let's look. Align and snap. So here we go, under align and snap. It puts the toolkit on the side here. On one side, there's on the other. You could do it in the center, up and down, and then of course you could use G, the hotkey G, to repeat last action. So if you're trying to, for example, there we go. If you're trying to repeat it, so I want to do left align, click that. Instead, I could just press G, and so it's a quick way to do multiple. I swear this used to be up here, the align, but they moved, once they added the UV toolkit, they kind of got rid of a bunch of it. I guess they combined it into one button. It used to be up here, so if you see me looking around here and there, it's because I'm still used to older Maya to a certain extent, but mostly assimilated to this one. All right, let's get this one down here. Now, a lot of times too, I might have like combined the sword all to one piece. For here, kept it separate. No particular reason. I just like the idea of having the different parts. In case I want to change it around a little. We got a little too much distortion there, so I chopped that up, and then I'm going to same thing here. Put this top of this guy. Make sure they match. Those are opposite. The other one was, so I'm not surprised. We're gonna flip it. Oop, wrong way. And we'll try to use match again. Where was it? Snap, match UVs. Cool. So we almost got all the sword. Now, if you're doing it all unique, obviously this can go a lot faster, but here we want to reuse texture space. So we get more out of our, whatever we go with, 512 or by 512 or something. Whatever size we determine at the end. Here we are. Now, I could actually use this one as reference for a less distorted. See how clean that is? For less distorted faces. And then just say the outer edges are less important, so maybe they'll have a little more distortion, right? So I'm going to use that as a guide. There we go. Now what I can do, so in addition to matching UVs, so let's do that first. It'll average it out, but it's still close enough. Match UVs. Now, we missed one. Now I can grab all those and we could pin them in place and then unfold one more time. So do all that, and let's pin. Man, these are all brushes, huh? Throwing me off. I'm sorry. I guess they added all over here. Pinning. So you hit pin. And the blue means I can't move those. If I grab these and move them around, they stay in place. Damn useful. But now I can grab everything, unfold, and it's going to move it into what it thinks is the optimal places for the least amount of distortion. So it's not going to be perfect everywhere because, some of these polys have to squash and stretch in order to fit proper, but no one's going to be looking in areas like that, right? So we could afford to have a little distortion in those areas. But now the front and the back will be identical. And then we can unpin this. That's a good one to hotkey too, I think. Put this guy over here. Same thing, I'll kind of like rebuild it. And I want to see now, we'll get into it more later, but for the resolution of objects between each other, you want them to be roughly the same amount of pixel space to screen size. So like your screen resolution, what's a better way to say it? you don't want to have like tons of pixels in like this part and then like far less in the hilt or the handle or any other part of the sword. You want that to kind of be evenly distributed. That way it doesn't look like, one has a huge texture and one has a tiny one. And that's determined a lot by how we unwrap it. So if I try to get these squares in the checkerboard to be roughly the same size, as close as possible, that's going to avoid that kind of look of where it's like more scatterbrained. As well as then it gives us control if we want to make the face or the hat have more detail because people are going to be looking there more, then you can kind of bend that rule a little, especially if you're planning on putting more detail there. But here, I'm going to go ahead. I'm just kind of going to remake it for my own sake so I know where stuff is. Like visually, I could look at the unwrap and be like, oh, okay, that's that part of the weapon. So this is a personal preference thing. It'll likely get shifted around as we start laying out the UVs proper. But for now, that'll do. So now that's done. Save it. Let's do the arms. We could probably mirror the arms as well. It looks like they are also, instanced. So we'll go ahead and grab that. Boom, boom. We got to make a cut here. So I'm going to pick the back side of it, wherever you're going to see it least. So maybe underneath, right? Maybe you see that the least amount. Sometimes it's towards the back. We'll just do it on the bottom here. I'm going to make a cut at the bottom. Then we unfold it. So the seam will be down there. We're getting a little weird distortion here, so I'm going to make another cut and then see how that helps. A little better. I'll keep that together. Didn't do too much. So now rotate this. You could, if you wanted to, like kind of flatten it out. It'll introduce a little distortion, but sometimes it's nice to have an edge that's flat so you can take up more of the texture space. Yep. Put that guy over there. Save it. Got the belt. Now this has an inside and an outside. Ooh, I don't know if we need the inside, to be honest. So we'll probably get rid of that. It's a good find. Saves us on texturing and unwrapping time too. There we go. This is one that, while it unwrapped okay, by nature of how it looks in 3D, it might be better if it was just a strip, right? Laid out in a strip. So here I'm just gonna, let's see, do we want to mirror this actually? This is one that we can mirror, so we're gonna get rid of half of it. Boom. We'll unwrap it one more time. It's pretty close. Straighten shell. Or straighten UVs. And there we are. Now we could move this somewhere. And maybe we make an instance in the meantime. If we move the UVs, the other one will follow it. And then when we combine it later, the UVs will be in the same spot. So that'll be nice. All right, buckle. This also has a back, which I don't believe we're going to see, so I'm going to get rid of that. Certain camera angles, you might be able to see behind that, but not so important for what we're doing. If it was in a game and the player could get behind it, then you might want to take a look at that, but for our purposes, eh. This one's getting kind of weird proportions, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to do just that front facing and the outside and see if it gives us something any different. Now, let's go back. So here I'm going to manually give it that rectangular feel because it doesn't really want to go rectangular right now. There we go. We'll grab this guy, we'll just put him right inside. Boom, savings. All right. However, it looks a lot smaller, huh? One thing I might do here, because we might not see this inside too much. You see how it's already getting a little wonky, but we might not see it too much. So I might scale this up and give it less space, but more space for this guy. All right, and the outside ones, you also might not see those as much. So this is something you might not have to do, but I'm going to go ahead and oops, save us a little space. Usually these kind of tricks I'll do after I've laid everything out. If I need to get a little more space, I'll go in and just like, okay, well, do I really need that much there? No, where's the important part? It's this, it's the front facing. There's some distortion here, of course. We can get rid of it by cutting these or just manually kind of moving it around. But I think I'm going to leave it. We can look at it real quick. We're going to leave it. No, let's look at it. So there you go. Looks nice. And it's square now, so maybe we'll just do that. All right, there's the belt. Grab it all, shrink it down. Put it down here. All right, making good progress. We got these planes. These are easy. Promise. Boom. Same thing. Now remember, I'm simply selecting all the polys and then doing an unfold command, which is here, I believe, too. This one's kind of looking a little funky. Try that again. There we go. Did I undo it? What did I do? Okay. So that'll be over there. You can also start combining some of these too if you don't need them to be separate pieces. Like for example, all these, I could just combine, right? And then maybe delete history just in case and save it. Grab these bad boys. And you can do multiple at the same time too, if you really want it. It's a little risky sometimes, some may say. But you know, it's your prerogative. If you want to risk it, you've saved, you cleared your history, you can be good to go. This is separate pieces right now, so I'm going to replanar map that guy. Now he's one piece again. The rock has a lot going on, but it's more organic shape, so I don't mind having it not perfectly, you know, in a grid-like fashion. And looks like it'll receive a texture fine, so as long as we give it the right amount of space. Just put these things close to each other. All right, there's that. So we're getting close. We're getting close. Next, let's do the body. Looks like it's already kind of done, but let's grab it. And I don't believe this is an instance. Yeah, this is already, it's pretty much already done, but it looks a lot different when you unfold it. So I'm going to get rid of half. Pop, pop. Grab this guy. We already got a front and back. I don't know if we need to have them separate. I'm just going to, well, I unfolded. It was in two pieces, but what we can do instead now is grab those shared edges, like we see it in red. Select them, and then just hit move and sew. Now they're one piece. And I can, you know, we feel it out. You want the top ones to be stitched too. Again, might introduce some distortion. It's up to you if you're okay with it. It's not too bad looking, to be honest. in this kind of area, another thing to keep in mind is, well, the shoulder pad's going to be over it. Unless you plan on showing it without the shoulder pads, maybe, having seam there is not too bad of an idea. And then, of course, we keep in mind that the front and back are covered as well. So if you wanted to do it unique, you could do it. But if you wanted to have a seam there, that'd be okay too. And but again, we're going to be using a painting program like 3D Coat. Generally, you don't have to worry about seams too much these days, but I guess it's a habit to mention it. So there we go. That looks all right. I like this to be kind of flat though. So one thing I might want to do is grab these and just go ahead and scale them so they're flat. Same with like the whole thing here. I'm just like, part of me is just like, I want to see it straight there. So maybe that's why we keep these edges cut, is that way we can have this and retain that flatness, right? So I can do that. That way I can put it up against a UV wall to get as much space as I can. I could pin those and unwrap the rest, and voila, this will stay nice. And you could go further if you wanted, right? I could take the bottoms. You're like, oh, I really am OCD about it, and I want I want it to be both the bottom and the side to get as much texture space as I can. Well, there you go. Pin them both, and now the rest will conform to those being straight angles, or straight. It's a nice 90-degree angle, but they're both straight lines. So that's a good way to handle that. So I'm going to unpin. And when you do this, chances are you're going to introduce some distortion one way or another. There's a seam here, so we can't really see too much. Obviously, it's curving there, but it's not always a bad thing. It's only bad if the polygons are like really stretched or funky or look, totally different than they do in your 3D space. So these are all tools that I'm talking about. These are all different techniques and tools for you to use to decide how you want to unwrap stuff, because each time you do a project, it's going to be a problem solving exercise, right? And you're going to say, okay, what tools do I have ready that I could tackle this? What's in my grab bag of techniques to help me tackle this challenge? And so I'm just trying to introduce a bunch of different ones to give you guys an idea of different ways you could work. And sometimes, it might not be a faster way, but it might sound more appealing, as weird as that sounds. It might just simply be like, I'm in the mood to do it this way today. And sometimes that's enough. You do it one way a bunch and you're just like, screw it. Let's try it like this. But that's kind of the beauty of all this stuff, is that you have options. I'm just putting seams here. Unwrap that guy nice and straight. He's looking pretty good already. Pretty good. And this one could probably be the same, but I want to paint in some like overlap shadows and stuff. So I'm going to do this one unique. And we'll do the same thing. Put the seam underneath. There we are. Combine those. Straighten works pretty well. Nice. So you see those checkers are way smaller than the others, so I'm just going to get them in the realm. Just in the realm. Okay. We're just looking and searching for the other pieces now. What hasn't been done. Still gotta do the head, the helm, the shield. We can go ahead and duplicate this guy over. Duplicate special. So let's do the shield real quick. We're gonna do something special for the shield. I mean, not too special, but we're gonna make it all symmetrical except for the middle. That way we can do custom details, or if we want, scratches over here not to be over there. So I like doing that where some parts are symmetrical. That way you have to paint less, but other parts are unique. That way it kind of like sells the illusion more. So let's grab this guy. We get the handle too. Ooh, planar map. Grab this, and let's see. So for this guy, I want to delete half, but it's at a weird angle. And I want to see real quick if I have. Yeah, it still has all the transforms there. So what I can do we still have the original? We do. So this thing, the reason I kept this is now we could unwrap this over here. I'll go ahead, do this separate. There we go. So I could do it like that. Or what I'll do sometimes is I'll leave it as one piece, right? I'll grab the whole thing. And I'll unwrap that and then I'll delete half. And I'll show you why. Because now, all that time I spent straightening out the other part of his body, it's already straight. And so now I can just grab half and they're already going to be aligned without me having to do that whole straighten thing. And it crashed. I'm not surprised. This is why I gotta save. All right. We'll be right back. And we're back. So Maya did grab a recovery file. So I'm using that one. Sometimes I'm a little nervous about those files just in case something broke here or there, but we're gonna try it, right? Let's give it a shot. So I probably should have cleared my history. Doing a command like that is usually safe, to be honest, just deleting half, but it could also be because this is an instance and things get funky sometimes with instances, so I don't use them super often, to be honest. I'll usually just duplicate stuff after the fact. But now that we have it back, let's safely move forward. All right. So we got the front and the back of the shield here. So I deleted half. And I have these nice straight edges. See how close I could put them next to each other, and we're not going to waste a lot of pixels that way. Whereas otherwise, if stuff is like kind of uneven shapes, it could be hard to use all that space. Let's grab this guy. We're just going to do the same thing here. Do one side at a time. And you know what? They look like they're already on top of each other here. So I'm just going to leave those in one spot. And we'll get this instead. That's pretty tiny. All right, scale that up. Get the back of it. And what you could do for stuff like this is you could mirror this in creative ways too, right? You can mirror it top to bottom, which might save you some time, right? So we could try that. I don't know why sometimes it gets really small like that. It's weird. Let's see. I'm going to actually separate this. got rid of it. Put a shader back on there. So it disappeared from over here. That's important. So we'll have to rearrange it, and we'll have to put that back over there. But that's okay. So with this guy, we can delete half of it. And hope Maya doesn't crash. There we go. So these just simply flipped over themselves. So I'm going to flip one back. It's like it was more of a 180. Top, top. There we go. So I'm just going to stack these. Match. Ooh. Small. Oh, it reset. Okay. 0.01. Fly. For something like these, we can kind of, let's see here. So what I'm trying to do is I don't want to add a cut down that, right? I'm just trying to look where I can put this thing together. It's the underside of it. We did have a checkerboard. That's right. There we go. There we go. I like it like looking like it does in the 3D view. That, make this a little bigger. Straighten. Straighten. There we go. And this guy, it's up to us if we want to straighten it or keep it like this weird funky shape. I'm just going to keep it like that shape. We'll find a way to fill up the other space later on. But now I can grab this. And it's going to be symmetry this side and this side, as well as top to bottom. So it's less painting for us. It'll look repetitive depending on how we paint it. But I don't anticipate a lot of people are going to be looking back there anyway, right? Let's go ahead and duplicate it. Move my pivot there. Duplicate and flip. There we go. Now I'm just going to combine them and merge. Actually, I won't merge the verts, but we have all the shells there now. So that's cool. And now I'm going to duplicate this again, and I want it to move it essentially the same. I wonder if we can, let's see here. See if I can move it in the same spot. I know there's a way to match transforms. I know I saw it recently. I'll have to find it. Find it later and show you guys. Match. Mesh. Transform tools. Oh, I feel like I'm so close. Match transformations. Okay, here we go. Match all transformations. This guy. And then this guy. Let's see. There's an order of operations here. You gotta do like one and then the other. Oh no, where was I? Modify. And it put it down there. So clearly a little different. Let's see if we can move it right into place. Whoop. Yeah, it's not too far off. Yeah, it didn't really help that much. So we still have to duplicate this to the other side though. But since it is still an element, that means we have to duplicate it within itself to get it to work properly. So let's see. I don't think I've used the mirror too much. This is the outside. Let's see here. I usually do things slightly different, so this is kind of playing here. Select this angle. Symmetrize. Nope. Oh, I was hoping that would work. I was hoping that would work. No, I guess not. Okay, so how I'd normally do this, honestly, after saving and whatnot, is I would just line up my pivot point, regular duplicate, combine them, right, and then just move it into place. The other one's gone now because I combined it, and so it got rid of the original. If we wanted, we could leave it there and make a duplicate of that thing, but I'm kind of just saying screw it for now, and we'll just put it back in there. Those things, yeah, nah. It served its purpose. So let's move this guy into place. We also have the old one for reference if we want. Get rid of that. Oh, we might need it. We might need it. Where was that guy? All right, let's see. Modify, convert instance to object. Now when we combine these, that won't go away. And now we could put it exactly where that one is. And one way to do that, so I'm going to combine these again. Now that we have all our UVs in the right spot. And I'm going to move my pivot there and just match the other one and just rotate it right into place. So I believe it was also scaled down. Yep, there it is. 906. I could probably use the rest of the transformations too, to be honest. But it's easy enough to. It's not like we need that level of precision. It's easy enough to just boop, get it in the right spot. There we go. Gotta say this is in a much different location than I expected. Did I move it over there? We could bring in the other one later if we're not sure, but it looks fine to me there. There we go, get rid of the old one. And now it's in place. We could bring these bolts over with us if we want. Still deciding if we wanted to use them. Might look cool. I could have just brought it over with it, but wasn't decided. So we'll see. This might be on top later on. Just get rid of this one for now. Still thinking. Now with this, like I said, I wanted the inside to be unique, so I'm just going to go ahead and re-UV that. Straighten. And there we go. And now what we can do with that gap that was there, let's just put the back in there. So we'll just flip this. Ooh, wrong way. Horizontal. And it fits right in. Match the scale. Actually, what we can do, get out of here, you. Is match these exactly if we want. Oh, now the snap works. All right, let me save it before this thing comes crashing down. I'm going to go ahead and snap that way. And then we'll go ahead and I'm just going to move these to the same exact position. That way they're overlapping proper. Not completely necessary, but it makes me feel better. There we go. And we don't have to weld them, but might as well get them in the same spot. That way, the reason I did this is just I like being able to visualize the shield right next to, like, the wood part or whatever we wind up this being right next to the outside. Unwrapping is a very personal thing, how you want to put your Tetris pieces together. But the goal, remember, is just to fill up as much of that space as you can. Get the nicest resolution. Okay. But if you can do that and also make it look good or make it make sense, then I think, why not? Okay, this thing we did not do. So let's go ahead. The way we made it, again, made it look like that. So let's go and unwrap this guy. I'm going to separate into the inside and the outside. The inside probably can delete. We'll see. Depends how much of that we're going to save. But for now, I'm just going to separate it by selection. There we go. Ooh, pretty. We'll grab the other one. Same thing. Looking good. Looking good. This is a really long one, so we'll see if we want to chop it in half or not. Depends if we get the amount of resolution we want. Like this, right? We could leave it like that, or I would chop it on the shoulders and then scale them up a lot bigger. So we'll see how the resolution, we'll see how the resolution works out. This thing, however, are we going to see the inside? It looks like we're going to see the inside here and here. So I could get rid of the rest of it, right? I could pull that stuff in. Maybe I'll leave a couple more just for the sake of it, because you could kind of see them, right? Maybe you glance behind it, maybe a little, but we got to make sure we don't prioritize that at all, right? We could pull it in so you don't see it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and invert my selection. There we go. Get rid of that. Now, get the viewport, press delete, boom, that's gone. So now they should be gone. There we are. Now, I want this thing to be mirrored. I'm kind of going back and forth on whether or not we should mirror it, but I'm thinking we should. It looks like a little shirt and pants. So once we have this thing straight, right? Nice. We'll select it. The other side for consistency's sake. Select it, delete it. And now we can place this wherever we want. Do that straightening out thing with the pinning. There we are. We can decide if we want to chop it up the shoulder or not. So I think that's almost everything. We have the helmet, which should probably be, I think we should symmetrize that too. I don't know if we need the inside bottom though. Don't think we're going to see that. So let's get rid of that. And we'll do the same thing. We'll select the whole thing. Let's see. Click the whole thing. Planar. Here, cylindrical probably work pretty good too. So I'm just going to get rid of half from the get-go. Let's put some seams up here so this comes out a little nicer. Looking pretty wonky right now. Maybe not right here as much, but over here for sure. There we go. Boom. Got this bottom thing here. Where is that? That's okay. Cut that. That. Yeah. Don't need you. Get out of here. Get out of here. Fix. All right. Clearing the history again because I'm a little paranoid. Now here you notice all this going on. I think that's because of a couple things. One, we have the inside being part of the same shell here without any extra cuts, so it's kind of trying to unfold that. It might also be because of this edge here, but not nearly as much. So we're going to take the inside and we're going to separate it. Much nicer. Even looks like the helmet a little. And then the inside too. And if you want, you could start like stitching certain parts together if you want it to be contiguous, right? So now it's like it goes up and inside out. So you can do that. If that's something you want to do. If it's something you're into. All right, almost got that ready. UVs. This thing also looks like it has an inside. It does. Get rid of him. There we go. Really small, unimportant thing here, so not going to pay it too much mind. There we are. Okay. Now, if we want to do something similar like how we did the other, I can go ahead and one thing I might do, instead of manually flattening or scaling that down, I might go ahead and now I'll duplicate it, right? Move my pivot point into place. Flip it around. First thing I'll do is select all the UVs, move them aside, then combine them. Now I can see both of them. Combine. I'll merge all the verts in the middle. And then I can go and say, okay, I want this and this, right? I want those welded. So now it's just a roundabout way of doing the same thing as before, but in a different way. So this way might be easier for some people. Like it might have saved me some trouble on the shield to do it this way instead. But it's fine. So there we go. It's just another way of getting that straight line down the middle. That's easy to align things with. Same with this, right? Where it's kind of like wonky right now. If I combine them, let's do all of them. And now that line is straight. Now, boom, we can just get rid of the half. So I can select it in the viewport here, or in here, which is nice, and then get rid of it again. But now I know it's all ready to be aligned really nicely for when we start packing in that space, in the UVW space itself. Which we will be doing shortly. I think we only have one more thing. And I think that's the head. I'm gonna leave that as is. Hashtag lazy. There we go. It does the job. So this, scale that down a bit so it matches. We'll unify all that stuff soon, as well as lay it out. Right now, this first phase is basically just getting each individual piece unwrapped where it just like does the job, right? Well, this guy doesn't need a head. For him, I'm gonna make a couple cuts down by his neck, which that sounds worse than it is. A couple seam lines down by his neck. That way, it'll be a little less. Ideally, a little less distortion down there. Maybe keep those two, because I'm not liking how that's looking, and we'll do it to these ones on the side instead. He has a weird chin. May or may not wind up editing the model a little when we get a little more down to it. We'll see. He's got some weird anatomy, if I may say so myself. And these things, not planning on using. They're still placeholder for now. The tongue I kind of want to use, to be honest. So maybe I have that popping out, and we'll add some cuts into the face after we texture it, just to make like a fake hole that the tongue's protruding out of or something. This is like we're winging this a little more, because it can go so many different ways that we don't have to decide right away. And the rest of it, this stuff, yeah, don't gotta worry about that. Separate the tongue. And you don't have to worry about what's the word? Symmetrizing everything before you lay it out. You can do that afterwards, but it's really up to you. Like, I like the look of seeing the full model, but at the same time, it's gonna be back in a minute, right? Once we lay it all out there. So let's go ahead and take a look at it all at once. Helm. And rocks. Okay. So those are all the pieces, right? Obviously, there's still a couple things looking weird here. So let's figure out what those are. But they're all mostly here. Now we got to fit them in this space, right? My question is, what the heck is this? Those are, yep, makes perfect sense. It's stuff we didn't want to do. Move that out of the way. We could also just choose not to select it when we're doing this, but get out of the way. Yeah, here. All right. So some of the pieces are overlapping. We could go in and separate some of those. The helm, for example, just so we could get access to everything pretty easily. Head over there. What else? Leafy thing, feather, whatever. Shoulder pad. And then That looks like most of the overlaps, right? Okay, so next we're gonna just get the squares, trying to match them scale-wise, and then we'll eyeball it and make it look like, if it's the right scale for, let me open that back up. We'll scale it, make it seem like it could all fit within this square, right? We want to kind of eyeball it to be like, okay, at their current sizes, we could fit it all in here. Is like how I prefer to start, and then adjusting as we start actually Legoing it or Tetrising it into this square. Yeah, we'll adjust the individual pieces as we go along. So that's what we're gonna do next. But for now, again, let's make sure we save. And then we'll go ahead and continue with the rest of the unwrapping. All right, so why do we want all these checkerboard squares to appear the same size? Well, it's because we want each of the parts to have a similar pixel density to one another for when we texture it. This way, some parts don't look drastically blurrier or sharper than the other parts due to having more or less pixels. So if we match the size of the checkerboards here, then we know that they're going to be a similar density. So we can get them all looking like the shield here. It doesn't actually matter how dense one of them is. The important part is that they're all a similar density. So it means they'll have roughly the same amount of pixels per space on the screen. So now that we've taken each of the pieces individually and have them kind of unwrapped as far as like shape wise, ready to paint, now we want to find the textile density, at least something that's kind of roughly the same, and then we'll pack it into the square. So right now I'm just going to look, I'm going to use one thing as a guide. So in this case, we'll just try to make it all match the shield. And then after that, yeah, we'll populate the 0 to 1 square here. So let's go ahead and do that. The head already looks pretty good. Look at these bad boys. Those look pretty small. Let's scale this down. And this is a really kind of a tiny piece of the model overall too, so we don't want to take up too much space. And then I'll just put that over to the side for my own reference. Just move it out of the way a little. Shield's looking good. The eyes we weren't going to use, I'm going to move that further away. Probably wind up deleting those soon because we're not going to export them. This is his body, and this is fitting in here, the tabard, so if anything, we probably want to match what this is because it's already fitting. I'm going to leave that where it is for now. Let's see here. You don't see that too much. We could probably symmetrize that as well. So I'm going to go ahead. We're going to do that. I could delete half. So yeah, you have options where you either delete the other half or you can kind of just flip it and stack it. So in this case, you flip it horizontally and then say, okay, grab it just so we can look. That's that piece. This is the other piece. So flip. Okay, cool. We can just stack those on top of one another. You could align them. I'm using scale right now just to make them exact. It's not terribly important that they're exact, but it doesn't hurt. There we go. It's also letting me know that, hey, this goes down way further than we need. So I could chop that guy. We don't need anything under there. Then we save UV space that way too. All right, next, put these over there. The head looks pretty good already. In some cases, where you know there's areas of importance, sometimes you can scale those UVs up a little and give them a little more density if you know you're going to be putting more detail there. In this case, the head doesn't have a tremendous amount of detail to begin with. Sword looks pretty good. Post. Should be a little taller. A little more towards the bottom, not as important, so I'm going to give it a little less. Body in general needs a lot more. There we go. You see how they're starting to become the same size pattern. Now, one thing unique to this part is that you're actually not going to be seeing this stuff under here. So we might go and delete. If we're positive some parts aren't going to be visible, then we could go move our verts around a little and get rid of the underneath, because it's just going to waste UV space unless you think you're going to be viewing it without the tabard, right? If you want to make multiple versions, one has a tabard on, one has it off, then you would keep the underparts. But for this, we probably won't be doing that. So we'll revisit the chest and delete some polys where we can get away with it. Belt. Sometimes it's hard to tell. In that case, I'll like slide up and down so I get a better view of the size of the squares. If you know areas aren't gonna have a lot of detail or things painted in general, you could get away with giving them a little less space as well. Shoulder pads. So those probably don't need as much either, so I'm going to scale those down a bit. Especially things that players aren't really going to see. These are kind of weird because they're skewed, but because of what's actually going to be on there and their importance, I'm not terribly concerned with making it unskewed a lot, which we could typically do by adding some cuts and letting it unfold a little more. But in this case, down there it's probably going to be mostly flat color anyway, so I can probably avoid that. This looks like it's going to be the underside. All right. Still not terribly visible. And we might be able to mirror this as well. Save a little space. Put that up here. We only got a couple things left. I'm going to save it real quick. The arm. And the belt and tongue. Tongue has way too much right now, which is pretty funny. You just make it huge and like detail the heck out of it. People that zoom in on the model be like, whoa. We're not going to do that, but I like having fun there. And then this piece, the belt itself. The belt looks pretty good, to be honest. All right. So that's already symmetried as well, right? Yes. So right now, I'm going to do the back of these. Is still instanced, yeah. So I'm going to do the underside here. Start by adding a cut. You don't need to make a cut when you flip stuff, but sometimes, you know, why not? Flip. Horizontal, pivot. Boom. Oops. And now, that piece should match that piece. Cool. So I need to flip it horizontal. I feel like it's not properly doing it. That and that. Great. All those are on the same side. Great. Flip. Whoa. There we go. It's doing it horizontal because I'm a dum-dum. Vertical is what I was aiming for. Now I can just snap the verts, pop it on top of itself, and then again, I'll just squish them down. So now, they will be symmetrical, one side to the other. Now, this, you can run into some problems doing this. The benefits are that you're going to save space texture-wise, and that you only have to paint half, because you'll get the other half for free. The downsides of something like this is that if you're painting cracks or details across the seam, you're not going to be able to go into this territory without it being symmetrical over here. So you might want to, in that case, make the entire thing symmetrical from front to back. That's one way to do it. And now that I say that, I'm kind of like questioning, maybe I want to. And so in situations like these, you have to ask yourself, do I need unique detail on both sides? Is there like an emblem or, you know, sometimes it's just detail like scratches or damage on one side that you don't want to be on the other? Or are you perfectly okay having whatever's on this side also be reflected on that side? And so that's something you've got to figure out, ask yourself, determine what the needs are of the current task, and then go from there. Because sometimes, even though you might be able to get more texture space out of it, sometimes it's not really an option because of what you have to accomplish visually. So I hope that makes some sense in terms of like making decisions for these kind of assets. For this one, I'm trying to think now, would I like it to have something different on the back? Or am I okay having it the same? Now in this case, I'm tempted to just mirror it. But for painting's sake and just to have more to show, I think it'd be cool to do something a little different on the back. Even though, you know, when we take pictures of this guy, probably going to be from one angle anyway. But we'll leave it as it is for now. We could always change our minds. Even late into the game, we could change our minds, but it just becomes a little harder the further you go. Okay. So at this point, I want to get all these into this square. And I could tell already that at the current size, these sure as heck ain't going to fit into the square. They're huge. So I like to eyeball how much space I need to get it in here, just to start with, and then you could adjust from there. So I even got to grab this guy because, well, you know, he needs to fit in there too, and he's taking up so much space right now. I need his checker to match. So I'm going to grab it all, and then I'm going to scale. It's kind of trippy looking. So I wouldn't look at the checkerboard. And then we want to say, okay, can I fit all these in there now? space-wise, and it's like, it's pretty close. You know, we could arrange some of these a little more if we want, to get a better idea, right? Like I could start putting this guy up there, this over here, to kind of BS our way into getting a better estimate. And you can see, okay, there's still a lot. We can't fit all that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to scale down a bunch more. So now it's starting to feel like we could fit it, because there's a lot here. So let's go with that, and we'll see if we can fit it all, and then we can prioritize certain parts and say we want those to be bigger or smaller. So now on our model itself, the checker is a lot larger, and it's kind of harder to judge the sizes of it, in my opinion. So what I like to do is I'll go to the material and I will tile it more. So by going to the color input, UV coordinates, the input of that, then you have repeat UV here. I believe we touched earlier. So in this case, I'm just going to put 20 and 20. So now we're kind of back to where we were. So we basically, when we scale the UVs down, we have them. And so we're doubling this and we're getting it back to the same kind of look we had before. Again, saving. And let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to symmetry this now, and we're going to decide, okay, which part of the under clothing can we get rid of? Put this over here. Get that out of the way. Let's duplicate it. Now under here, my question is, what aren't we going to see? So for example, one way you go about it is by selecting everything and then deselecting what you see. And then you're left with pieces you can get rid of because you clearly weren't able to select them or see them. Right? It's like, oh, I can't really see much there. And you can see in the UVs here what you're actually getting rid of. So I'm like, okay, maybe we want to keep the shoulder stuff. Maybe it's just these pieces, and that's in the back. So what are those two? That one's under there. At this point, it almost feels like it's not worth it. So what about the ones that were right in the front? Well, that's a very large polygon. So in this case, I could shrink it down. For instance, grab this, pull it in, kind of get rid of the need for that. But at this point, honestly, it doesn't look like it's taking up a tremendous amount of space. I'm just going to make a judgment call here and just leave it. And if we want, we can have a version with it off. But I did want to talk about how, there's opportunities for saving space if you desperately need more. But right now, let's go ahead and pack it. Now we want all these in there. I'm going to deselect the eyes and mouth just to get those out of there. Okay. So let's see. I'm going to go to the UV mode up here. I like the half and half view. And now again, we want to fit it in the box that the green and red are kind of framing. So I'm going to start with one piece at a time. And what I like to do is do the ones that have like a squared off edge and just fit it to the boundaries, because I find it saves more space when you could really pack things in tight, versus doing like organic shapes like this first that you might just waste room. So this could be a really fun part depending on how you look at unwrapping. View it kind of like as a Tetris puzzle, right? So do my best to enjoy it. And then I'm also thinking kind of a personal preference, but like where I put each piece. So if things are lower on the model, I will favor putting them lower on the UV sheet, or just in an order that visually makes sense when I looked at the texture itself. If I want to texture straight on the file on the flat, I guess the texture flat versus in the 3D coat. But again, all preference. So feel free to do what you will. But those are some of the habits I've kind of picked up organizationally. Pin this. Again, to get that kind of flat surface. That way when I put it in the space, it'll fit better. So I could straighten that out too, but there's a lot of curve there. I'm gonna keep this is literally chopped, so straight should unfold pretty decently. Arm. It's already feeling like I could start scaling stuff up because there was a lot of dead space in between these before, and if we can place this efficiently, chances are we'll have more room to work with. Shoulder pad up there. Yeah, everything's feeling pretty small. The helmet. Let's see here. Fold. There we go. Do like having the center there though, so I could select that one too. All right, so now it's squared off still. And then since these are also part of the helmet, I'm going to try to just get these nearby. Related pieces, same thing. I'll try to just keep them in a similar spot. Where's this? Down here? Ah, that little thing. Another thing you want to watch out for when packing stuff is depending on the size of the texture you're using, you want to give space in between the shells, because if, for example, you fill up the entire space and it gets like really close like that, if your texture's small, so like a 512, 256 or lower, in some cases even a bit higher, you're going to get bleeding where the pixels kind of will fuzz into other areas of the UVs, just by nature of the amount of space it takes up. So be aware of that, is that when they get down-resed a little, you're going to be running into some trouble sometimes, which is especially bad when you have symmetrical areas or like normal maps. That could cause some issues. So with that in mind, I generally try to keep a little space from both the edges and between each other. But I think looking at what we have already packed and looking at what's left, I think we can size things up a decent amount, to be honest. So one way I'll accomplish this is I want to get everything roughly sized up the same, right? So I'll select it all. Because yeah, visually, let's do this real quick. That fits in there, and those are going to fit in there. So I'm going to grab it all, just scale it up, and then start repacking a little. So for example, here I might move the arm. The rest of it can still pretty much fit in the same spots because we worked with the corners first. And I might have been overestimating how much space it needs or underestimating. Estimating wrong. It looks like we had more space than I gave it credit for. Let's see. Once we get the rest of these into, we'll make some more decisions. Now, an occasion where it might be good to leave some empty space is if you know you're going to add something, like add a prop or use that sheet for additional things like hair cards or something that you hadn't modeled out yet and might model to the texture. Then you want to make sure you keep that stuff in mind. And sometimes it's good to have a placeholder in there. So like these grass planes were kind of a placeholder, even though they're not modeled out. We kind of got the space taken up. They might not follow these exact shapes or not. Probably will because I'm just getting paint on the model. But you're able to leave that space in your texture, paint it up, and then at that point, model to that. And that can be a really useful technique. Okay, we're almost filled it up. So we're taking up a good amount of space. We probably have an opportunity to scale up some things more. So we'll do that in a minute, depending on how these fit in. That's also part of the helmet. Fit that up here. Maybe I can fit that up there. Okay, sword. There's some funny stuff with the sword. Having the back be on the same as the front. I'm sure I'll pay for some of these choices while we're texturing. Might lead to some embarrassment because a lot of this stuff you just figure out as you go along. You have ideas of, okay, what worked in the past? Do I want to try it again a little differently and learn from that? But in general, we know what it's going to accomplish. It's just whether or not the edging is going to be annoying for me. So we'll find out together. Oops. Definitely looks like there's a little more room. Because this ain't much to fit in here left, right? It is pretty close though, surprisingly close. So now we can decide, do we want to scale a couple things up? Is there something we want to add instead? Because regardless of what you do, there's going to be a little rearranging, right? So in this case, I might say, maybe I want this thing to be a little bigger, right? Maybe I want this on this side, have a little more detail. So I'm going to flip it, get it up against the other wall horizontally. And I'm going to take this stuff, move it out the way. Say, okay, now I have that much more room to play with. So what I like to do is I like to snap my pivot using D and X to that grid, and then I'll scale from there. Boom. Not a huge change, but still more detail, especially when you start to get painting. You're going to have more to work with. Now I could refit these things in there. Maybe I want a little more to the arms, right? Move this thing over. Give this piece a tiny bit more on the width. This guy probably ain't going to fit over here. So we could choose if we want to put it somewhere else. Let's take this, put him over here. So again, we're kind of retetrising based on our needs. And with the shield, maybe give the shield a little more. The shield has a pretty large presence. Again, we don't want to seem like the pixels are out of place, like they're that much bigger, but enough that we could get the kind of detail we might want. Seems like awfully big for those ropes. I'm not gonna lie, seems excessive, but this is also something you can do symmetry with, as long as you carefully plan where you want your shadows to hit and stuff like that. I'm gonna leave them, and we're gonna have fun painting that entire thing. And then you're gonna hear me say, "Why did I do that?" But sometimes it's like deadlines too. It's like, all right, it's not worth the time to individually unwrap separately, all that kind of stuff. I got all these excuses. Okay, sword, definitely looking a little lower than the shield, so we'll kick that up. Okay, now I think we're having a little snugger of a fit. It'll fit more snugly. Maybe we want to give this slightly more. And just move the helm over. Now it's up to you how much time you want to spend in something like this. I find it kind of meditative, and kind of fun. So sometimes I'll maybe take a little longer than I should, but it feels good getting an unwrap you like too. It's like, okay, these might be too close. Now that everything's kind of fitting in, we'll give it breathing room. And I could take a zoom out, take a look at all the pixels, be like, okay, that feeling good. You could also use soft select in here with B, and then B in dragging the mouse. So if you really want to like pull one part over, it'd be really useful. I want this one to be a little more that way. And then if it's going across objects and you're like, I don't like that, again, you could double click, go to the options for soft selection that pop up, and then change it from volume to surface. And it should stay. See how it's only within the connected surface. So I prefer that, but sometimes you want it across objects. So they all have their uses. All right, let's see. Save. Don't be crazy. Make sure you're saving. You're only saving yourself. Doot, doot. Down. Now we gotta fit a couple last things. That's the underside, which is super weird, but feels like it got more space. Well, I guess it is just as big as the top. You're not really gonna see it though, so I'm like, Now we still have a little more extra space than I would normally like, but let's get this stuff in first. Then we'll call it. Who knows? Maybe we'll add some. For something like this too, it's not uncommon to do the floor or environmental pieces as a separate texture map, but for the purposes of this demo, it should be fine. I'm not going to make too much of a difference here. So hopefully the main points come across regardless. Okay, now we got the grass spots. I could probably just fit them wherever. I want to get them roughly close to one another, just because we had to use the alpha around it. If I could use the same alpha space, I'd like to. Doesn't make a huge deal, to be honest. Just a little nitpicky. So we could actually do without these at all. And the idea is just like save space for grass. That's basically what that is. These are a placeholder for this space will be used for grass. So you could effectively do it without anything there if you wanted. There's also this helpful button to toggle to see it filled in. Or this one, which will show how much stretching there is. So if it's having a little more space per poly, it'll be blue on average, or if there's a little less pixels per poly, it'll be red. So there might be a little less in here compared to the average or what it's related to in 3D view. But these views also help you see the wasted space, which sometimes you just can't help but do anything about. All the non-white or non-filled in areas right now. There's a lot of tiny pieces over here I'd like to do more with, but like technically we could straighten this if we wanted, but also purple means overlap here, and the red is if it's flipped the wrong way. Only really matters if you're using normal maps, I believe. So watch for that if you're doing anything, but we'll go over that more when we're doing a tutorial with some normals. But here it's looking fine. Turn that back off. I'm trying to decide if I want to fill the space some more, or maybe we could do an effect here, like a glow or something. I don't know if it'd be useful for this guy. Maybe something like on the ground, like dust particles or something. We could find a use for it. If not, then it's wasted. Oh well. Okay. Otherwise, it's looking pretty good. Most of it is looking like it fits pretty well. Let's see here. This guy's a little stretched. Not really squares. Scale that down just a little. Things can be distorted here too. I try to make them as much of a square as possible, but you could technically stretch it. It just means you're going to get more pixels one way than the other. So I try to avoid it going to the extreme, but it doesn't hurt for like, you have a little extra room. You're like, oh, I want to scale and fill it up. No harm in that. Okay. We got a couple pockets of empty. We're going to deal for now. Like this here. You could theoretically take all these and then crunch them and fill that space. You can do that. Okay. Let's see here. I feel like in this kind of case, I could do the, because how am I trying to put this? Because the fact that I have a little extra space, what I'm feeling is, since there's nothing else I necessarily want to add, I was doing the mirroring to, well, one, to save time when texturing, but two, to save room on the texture sheet. But what I'm thinking right now is, considering there's some extra space there, it's not being used, I could probably uniquely unwrap the shield completely. So this section having the opposite side where it wouldn't fit there right now, I could probably put it right here and then put the grass over there. So I think that's what I'm going to try, and that'll let us do a little more detailing on the shield, which is kind of a focal point. So it's kind of nice to have unique textures there too, instead of just symmetry. But you know, there's a rhyme and reason for each thing we do, and depending on your project, one thing might be favored versus another. But in our case, we got a little extra room, so hey, you know what? Let's move the grass out. I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to re-unwrap that part. Save it first, because I don't trust Maya sometimes. Planar map it, unwrap it, and then boom. Now we could grab that middle one, and then straighten shell. And it's going to be straight up and down, which, while unnecessary, I do like. I got the back of it here, which I kind of missed because we were looking at the front a lot. You might see the back a little more than I realized, so I'm going to scale that up to give us a little more density. And now we're kind of running out of grass spots, but you know what? Here and here, we got to split it up. We split it up, but it'll make do, and we'll fill up the whole sheet, which just makes me feel good inside. All right. Could also, if we wanted to put it down here, perhaps. I'm trying to see where the biggest uninterrupted blocks are. Like, for example, I could put this down here, move those in those spots, and then have a little more spot there. So maybe we'll do that. This is where you get a little creative if you want. This is actually part of the fun of it, in my humble opinion. So Fill that spot there. Probably be smaller too, to be honest. We have the room, so I'm not going to shrink it too much. And this one also could be a little smaller. And maybe I'll fit that one like right here or right up here. I generally like to keep the orientation of things the same too, if I can, like this being vertical. I would prefer, but it doesn't hurt anything to rotate it. It could be smaller though too. We got something in here. Right. It might be a little close, but we can move it later on if we need. This is the sides. Okay. That we can straighten that out. We'll see. It's kind of a fun shape right now. If we can fit it somewhere as it is, it might feel good. Playing a game. Kind of fits. Whoa. Oh, look at that. That's pretty cool. Let's go with that. Scale it down a little. It's kind of an unimportant piece because it's just a little strip. So as long as we can fit a little color there, we're going to be fine. We found a spot. We did it. Good job, team. Okay. So now we also have some spot for grass. So again, I don't need to put these there, but since I'll probably just paint on them anyway, we'll toss them in there. Do a couple patches. And now the thing with the grass too is that it's going to be in here, and then everything else needs to be alpha, so it needs to be black. We could fit them. They could overlap a little technically, as long as the alpha's there. Yeah, so let's see. Got that piece. That piece is over there. So there's a little areas here and there, but I think it should be fine. Now I'm just being finicky. Okay. For our purposes, I think we are good. Just kind of making sure I got a little bleed space, so sometimes you might just scale something down teeny weeny bit or give it some breathing room. Again, this view can help you see if things are too close. Like this might be in there, but it's also a really tiny thing. But you know what? We'll give it its own space. We have the space right here. We'll just do it. And we'll just leave all this for grass. We want to do some extra. Very cool. And this stuff could always be adjusted later while we're texture painting. If we see something that we're like, definitely needed more, we can hop back in and shuffle things around. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Next we are going to, well, let's go back to regular. guess Maya Classic. Next, we're going to resymmetry everything, make sure the model is kind of the way we want it. Let me turn off the texture here. Make sure the model is the way we want it. I think we already set all our smoothing groups, so we're just going to have to refix the ones that are on the symmetry line because they'll probably be a hard edge, like right here. So we can soften that edge. We'll go through, we'll do that, we'll double check it, and then we'll export it and get it into 3D Coat for some painting. That's the exciting part. I'm excited. You excited? I hope you're excited. This is going to be the cool part when we paint some textures, talk about light and color and form. I love all those things. They're super fun. All right, cool. Make sure you save, and we'll keep going. Now that we're excited about texturing, let's finish preparing this guy for bringing it into 3D Coat. So we're basically there right now. So the things that we want to do, as I mentioned, pretty much get these things mirrored across, and then fix the smoothing groups in between, and then export it. So pretty straightforward here. So right now I'm just basically going to go through each of these that I know need to be mirrored. For example, the helmet and the tabard. Mirror them. Let's weld them, and then fix the smoothing group. So again, you have the mirror tool you could use. I like my habit of duplicating and then just scaling. Should probably try to break that habit and get back to the mirror tool, but for now it works. There we go. Grab both of them. I'm going to combine them. Get rid of the history there. I like to select it all, merge the verts, and then we can see if I turn off the wireframe again that there's a seam. Well, not a seam, but a hard edge. So we'll go in and we'll just double click to select the loop, and then just go ahead and soften that edge. There we go. We got one more back here. All right, that's the helmet. Now we have the little strap. Smooth that, easy enough. You can just go ahead and press G. G will repeat the last command in Maya. So if you did something like an extrude or smooth, pressing it again will repeat the command. So it'll just smooth whatever your next selection is. Okay, chest here. Combine. Merge. And then smooth. And the same here. I always pay attention up here in the top left, the vert count. So right here will be the verts in my selection. And I see it go down to 119. That seems about right. Because essentially all the middle ones, where there were 2 each, now there's 1 each. So it would go down an appropriate amount. And now same thing, I could double click to get that edge loop. Be careful, it does stop wherever triangle is. So if you double click and you see it's not going up, you got to manually select or start your loop again from there. Soften. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I might keep this one in here, hard edge, because it's such a sharp angle. Smoothing might look weird otherwise. And this is all stuff you can play with later on too. Go. You kind of can see past it there, so I might pull this in, pull this out. And you're not really going to see through it much. I'm not terribly concerned, but we'll see on the angles that we take pictures of. There might be something that we correct later, depending on how we feel. Because stuff like that, yeah, you might see through it. I thought I looked at that earlier. Stuff like that always gets to me. I'm like, oh, I could fix it. So let's see, maybe we do that real quick. Let's check the unwrap. Look at the whole thing again. And so it's here, and then here. So both of those have room. That's not too bad. So we'll just do that right now because I neglected it earlier. Just gonna extrude, snap to the vert there. And now it's creating a whole new poly in our UV space, which isn't really ideal, but we could work with it. So I'm just gonna weld these. Same here. I'm just gonna go ahead and delete half again. I'll redo that. That way I can do the UVs first. This guy, I believe, was right here. And these are kind of back facing, so it's not like we need to see a ton of it. So I'm actually going to prioritize this bottom one and then scale down the other two. Like that. Because you're not really going to see them. Just kind of getting that back face in there just in case. And this one, it's see-through, but again, we'll see how much of a problem it is. But for now, I just want to get us going. And the other one, I believe fits right here. And same concept with this one. We're going to shrink down the top here. Because you're not really going to see it. All right. Now we'll continue with doing what we were doing. I'm going to save it, duplicate this guy. Okay, is that all of it? Just gonna double check. I got these things, bottom, those. This guy looks good. This, aha, going on there. So does this guy either have unwelded verts? All right, that's what it was. So sometimes we can't smooth something. Usually the verts aren't welded, or the normals are locked. But in this case, they're welded. So we weld those, and then it'll let us, boom, smooth it up. So the reason I'm doing this now is it's going to affect how it's shaded, like if you put it into a game. But it'll also affect if we want to bake some lighting in 3D Coat to give us a head start on our texturing. This will affect how the AO, how the light map kind of, or how the light gets baked down into it. It's going to respect all the smoothing that you've done. So make sure you save it. And now what you can do is select it all. And well, there's a couple things actually. You can export it as is, and we have it in lots of pieces. So something you might want to do now is go through and name stuff if you want to make it a little easier to see. So I'm gonna clean this scene up just a little. I'm gonna try to do it pretty quick here, but it's an important step, and so I'm just gonna show it anyway. So let's see. I'm gonna delete empty transforms here, and then you could start grouping things that you want to appear together visibility wise. I'm probably gonna keep a lot of things mostly separate. I might group together the shoulder pads, for example, and the rocks perhaps, like all that stuff. I'm going to want to separate the grass planes from the rocks. And then I can name them, and this will be visible in 3D Coat to let us know, instead of having these random names like P-cylinder, plane. That's what you're going to see as the name. And so if we could put a more descriptive name in there, we're only helping ourselves. Or if you're working on this file with someone else collaboratively, I'm sure they'll appreciate that. Plus, future you, if you wind up taking a break from it and come back and texture it later, that'll help. So the lights are fun. I'll leave them in there, but we'll get rid of some of the other stuff we don't need anymore. This is still an instance. That's actually pretty useful. We'll leave that in there. Concept we could probably get rid of. Just cleanup wise. Boop. Delete layer. All right, so let's see here. So let's name this. Name this helmet. Feather. Might be a leaf. We'll see. Keep you on your toes. Head. Usually I like to do as few as pieces as possible. As few of pieces as possible. But here there's just a lot of overlapping parts. So I think that way we have a lot of options with toggling on and off stuff. Keep them mostly separate. I'm going to hide those. I'm just going to put them in the instances for now because we're not going to export those. Those are going to be textured in. The tongue will come out a little. I should probably edit that slightly. What is this? This is... I'm going to group these. Oh, that's right. We didn't clone these around. See? Getting the export stuff. Starting to notice things. Ooh. Lights. Rocks. Do I want to combine the rocks? We can keep them together here because that's the other thing. In 3D Coat, you can hide things by clicking their polygons. So it might be easy enough just to hide them when we're in 3D Coat. Okay, looks like we have most things named. If I get rid of some of these transforms, that wouldn't go away. Okay, so let's see. Like that. We'll fix the tongue real quick. Make it go a little closer. It's so silly. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. You could rearrange these things by middle mouse dragging, but be aware if you middle mouse drag into another item here, it'll nest it. So that'll be the parent, and you could just drag it right back out if you want to take it back out. So it won't be a group like this, but it will be like it'll be parented. It'll be a child of whatever one you drag it on. Okay. You can also rearrange these however you want. I've had some luck with 3D Coat respecting the order, and other times not at all. So kind of on your own with that. There might be a specific way to put in the information to get it to show up, because you can't really rearrange this order in 3D Coat as far as I'm aware. But it's not too bad. As long as you name it, at least you'll find stuff. So what was, yes, the bolts. Uh-oh. It was under instances. That's why. So this is something I like, but did I unwrap it? I didn't unwrap it. So I kind of like having the extra detail pop out. It's probably unnecessary, but for the sake of having it there as an option, let's go and take care of that real quick. We'll just unwrap it all as one. I'm sure we could find space for this in the unwrap. And remove it from that group. Actually, I'm going to add everything here into the Geo folder. There we go. Then we'll grab this. Let's find it a home. It's probably safe to just guess the size of this because it's very small. It's probably going to be fine wherever. I could also look at these as reference and say, okay, how big is this bolt compared to, like, say, the belt? It's like, you know what? That's pretty comparable as it is. And I know the belt buckle's kind of big. So this looks like a nice spot right here. Boom. There's, we could fit another 8 of these things if we wanted to. There's space. So I'm not too concerned about that. This one bolt. And we can go ahead and copy it around. I know I don't have the instance for this anymore, but the how these are actually in space isn't super important for it to be like perfect looking, because they're just kind of slapped on there. And again, if we feel the need to edit these later, it's an easy enough job. So we'll just do the top three. I'm trying to think what, let's see, concept had. Of course, I deleted that already. Okay. So I can combine these now. All right. And then I'll probably take another look later and decide once we start texturing if we want a couple extra lower. It might make sense to have a couple on the bottom. But for now, I could decide that. Another time. So go ahead and select everything that you want to be exported at least. Like for instance, I'm not going to grab the lights or the instance sword. It could help sometimes to do duplicates of these and put them out on the sides if there's a lot of overlap and stuff like that. So like for instance, you grab one of these and put it over here. As long as it shares the same UVs, then you could texture this one and it'll appear on here, right? So that could be really handy. But for this guy, we'll just do it as is. So again, save your work, hit export. You go ahead and then find your folder. And then I'm going to make a new folder, texture. Go in there. I'm going to export as an OBJ. And I'm just going to call it combat dummy model. There we go. And let's find out how that imports into 3D Coat, see if there's anything we need to adjust or change, or if it's going to work as is, and then we'll start painting.